What is up, grinders? Welcome to an MMA Crunch Time Before Lock. I am your host, Mike Brown, aka H3 Buddha, here with my pal Squirrel Patrol. Squirrel, 13 fights, down to 12 fights. Not fun, but I mean, something was in the water. People are missing weight. You brought it up in our behind the scenes chat. It's just like, come on, man, be professional. You got UFC 300 next week. Are they taking a break too? They're drinking a couple beverages, getting ready for UFC 300.
Yeah, we'll see. I do think you see a little bit more of the missing weight on the fight night cards. It was 4 fighters yesterday, but only one fight got canceled. Sometimes I do think like when both fighters miss weight, I think it might be like a kind of agreement in the morning, right? Like they didn't seem to like be trying that hard. They both missed by about 2 pounds. The Cynthia Calvillo one, I think we were kind of talking about her motivation, like behind the scenes or whatever. Going into the week, I think I was talking about it with Blender yesterday and saying like, well, she might show up really, really motivated. She's really trying to make a comeback, or she like might miss weight and the fight gets canceled. And it turned out to be the latter. That was probably the fight I'm going to miss the least, so I don't mind it being canceled off the card. The Alex Hernandez thing is a little bit interesting because he had a really good amount of win equity, and for the price, like the line, I feel like had been moving in his direction since pricing came out, but now since weigh-ins, that's kind of reversed a little bit. But you would think that the extra weight might help him, but then you don't know because he was trying to cut weight for that extra hour. Maybe that's really draining. So the line's been moving in the favor of Damon Jackson. So that's a kind of an interesting dynamic on the card.
It is. I think there's some context all over the slate because there's the obvious fights that you don't want a piece of. And it's like, the Norma Dumont and Jermaine Durandamy, any card, right? Any other card that wasn't like 12, 11 fights, you just wouldn't even have a chance at looking at it. But it's like, I don't want a piece of it, but if a ceiling happens, there's a lot of unknowns. That's what I'm trying to get at, right? Like, I'm not just jumping to that fight thinking it's the best thing in the world. I'm just saying there's no ownership there is essentially what I'm saying.
I think Jermaine Durandamy might start picking up some steam because the line's moving in her direction. She's now got a pretty good win equity for the price. And at 7,600, she doesn't need to do a whole lot to get there. It's like if projections don't adjust to her having like a little bit of like win equity now, I wouldn't be over the field because like she could just get a solid win. Doesn't need to get the first round knockout. Just a nice solid win at 7,600. That's a pretty good piece, and it allows you to do some stuff in the lineups.
Favorites win out or dogs? Because I feel like you can really make a good case for a lot of dogs on this slate. We'll kind of nail down our favorite dogs on this entire card, but I mean, obviously you have the Arguedas, the main event underdog, and Curtis and Peak. I feel like that's right where the ownership is. And the question is it going to be 2 of the 3? Is it going to be one of them and then just trying to get different with a dog? Or is it going to be more opt to center your ownership there and then differentiate up top? Because I got to be honest, personally, I think differentiating up top is easy this week. I think it's more difficult to go down the list of names here. And I don't have confidence going into a Damon Jackson. Though, like you said, there's a little bit of movement, but it's like the guy doesn't fight the smartest, and he sometimes gets controlled, especially with Hernandez coming out hot. And Giagos is a guy who can come out hot, but he's got no durability down the stretch. So it's like, how are you handling all this centrally located underdog ownership this week? Because it's tight.
Yeah, so I think I don't like. I guess of the chalky underdogs, right? I like Peak probably the best, and just because he's got like kind of math and pace on his side. He's seen pretty high ownership, but he also has a 20% chance of winning in the first round. And he's 7,200. Like I'm not sure I've seen a fighter, maybe some of the kind of lumbering heavyweights, right? That have first round knockout, percentage of about 20% at like 7,200 ish. But they only have a 25% chance of winning the fight, right? So they're totally first round or bust. And yeah, 20% of the time they're going to get that first round win. But if they don't get that first round win, they're basically out of it. Trevor Peak is not that kind of fighter. Like Trevor Peak is a high paced, like no downtime in those fights. I saw him live in Jacksonville last June. He had another fight since then. He lost that fight last June. Yeah,
Was
and
that the Hackett?
yeah, the standing hammer fist, and I think it was against Mariscal, who's also on on this card. But like I'm really surprised that fight didn't score higher because I mean that was just the fight that had everybody going crazy in the arena. It's just so high paced. So Trevor Peak is going to stand and trade. He is not afraid to take a shot, and so it's interesting going up against Charlie Campbell. Charlie Campbell was like pummeling Christian Duncan in that kind of Tender Series fight a couple years ago and couldn't put him away. And then finally got sat down himself. We were just talking about it like pre-show. So yeah, Trevor Peak of the chalky underdogs is probably the guy that I have the hardest time getting away from. Like I wrote him up as one of my Scroll Patrol's takedowns. I don't like putting guys with like high ownership in that article. Like for Trevor Peak, I think it's deserved.
Well, I mean, you're talking about a smaller octagon, right? At the apex. There's more opportunity for him to have volume striking or get, kind of knocked out himself. So I love it. I love that take. It's just, I don't know if we've had this context of slate in a while, have we? It's just Argueta, Curtis, Peak. You have three strong plays. I mean, Argueta on any play, on any site anywhere is going to be a great play because of his aggressive wrestling, his pitter patter. I love those little pitter patter strikes. Give me all of that, and then the ability to get a first round finish is there too. It's not like he just has to cook his opponent over 3 rounds. And I guess we got to group Curtis in here, man. I mean, he won the first fight. My problem with Curtis, and I tagged him just as well as you did, is that it's late notice. I mean, the guy's always in shape. He's always looking the role. I just don't know how this goes because is there a world where Curtis gets more ownership than Allen and Allen ices him early and kills off a lot of that ownership?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I'm going to end up being a little bit under the field on Chris Curtis because, yeah, there's so many other underdogs in that range that I like. And like, what if like Chris Curtis getting a second or third round win is totally plausible and potentially doesn't land him on the winning line. He is cheap, but like, yeah, he's 100 more than Trevor Peak. And I believe he's got about the same win odds as Lucas Bresky, who's like 6,800. So like, yeah, if Lucas Bresky gets a second or third round win at 6,800, or Trevor Peak gets a second or third round win at 7,200, like they could easily outscore Chris Curtis, and then suddenly you don't need a main event, a main event fighter if Chris Curtis wins that fight.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got an active chat today, so get your questions in. And you said it. Lucas Bresky, I mean, you gave me a great pivot here to go to the next spot. This is a very interesting context to the slate because you have a virtual unknown that has a brother in the UFC, Walter Walker. This is a guy who has a strong inside the distance line, most expensive guy in the slate. I don't think I'd be surprised if he put up 115 points. But what does his loss look like? I mean, we now have Lucas Bresky, who has 3 straight losses in the UFC, and he's the lowest priced guy. Any form of a win is going to be good because you're going to have that scoring ability, right? Walker is a grappler that's going to probably try to be going in there for takedowns at heavyweight. I don't think it's going to slow down. Like, I think there's going to be a pace here, and I've kind of brought it up on the Ground and Pound podcast, which you guys should give a listen to before lock. Bresky, sneaky volume. This guy can score 124 strikes. He actually has the ability to score a lot of strikes over 3 rounds, and you can't say that about a lot of guys in the heavyweight division.
Yeah, and so he is by far, he's the cheapest fighter on DraftKings, but he's got like the tied for the 4th or 5th worst like win odds, which 4th or 5th worst win odds. He's got a 1 in 3 chance of winning the fight, but he's probably going to see less ownership than that. And at 6,800, if he gets that win, I don't know, like he allows you to do anything with your lineups. The interesting thing is if you put him in at 6,800 and then you're not playing Walter Walker, suddenly you don't need the salary because and I think that a lot of people are going to be clicking on Walter Walker because of the narrative of, he's Johnny Walker's brother. And I think a lot of people are just going to end up with salary, right? Like a lot of people are going to be playing Trevor Peak and be like, well, I've got, now I've got all this money. Maybe they're playing Trevor Peak and Chris Curtis. So, wow, I got all the salary I need. And I'm going to, who's this most expensive fighter on the slate? Oh, he's Johnny Walker's brother. Like, all right, great. and they're going to click on Walter Walker. I like the idea of going to Lucas Bresky. I want to be over the field on, especially if he's seeing like about
You
single
love
digit
your
ownership.
you love your min salary, like maybe bottom 3 type of guys, because here's exactly what you nailed. You can do whatever you want with your salary, but then those obvious builds start, right? You start picking off the values, then you get different when you go up the board. That's why I think it's a really interesting play.
Yeah, and you kind of started off the show with this, that I feel like there's just not a lot of differentiation in the $9,000 range. Like a lot of times we have that fighter that's like just so hard. It's like a binary decision point, right? Like, well, this guy's got about a 50% chance of getting the first round win, and 80% chance of getting a win with the most expensive fighter. But I got to make a decision here. They're going to see a lot of ownership here. Like, there's nobody in the $9,000 range that I am like afraid to get away from. Maybe, yeah, I'm
I
trying
was
to think.
surprised
Yeah,
that like the ownership isn't a little bit more evened out. So you have it centrally located towards Bahamondes, Walker, and Campbell. Obviously Campbell, targeting Trevor Peak, right? But the odd two out that I actually think are interesting are Mullins and Moreno. And I think it's because you legitimately have two paths of extreme scoring. You have Mullins coming in here against Cornoli. Cornoli, what did she do? She gave up a ton of control time, a ton of takedowns last time out, and wins a home cooking in France, right? Like this girl did not look good, but a little bit outstruck her. So she does have a path to score in Cornoli if she knocks Mullins out. They both, like you said, maybe gentle girls, not gentlemen decision. Let's not cut weight, right? But then on the same time, I'm grouping in Moreno into the same thing because of the price right there, $100 difference. And Moreno has a different path. He's got a quick win bonus sitting right there for him. So it's like it's a very weird slate where if you go the grappling route, yes, that's a safer play. But Moreno has multiple knockdown upside. He's got potentially knock down, get some control time. There's a world where Moreno absolutely is one of the bigger scorers in the 9K.
yeah, I agree. And I think we tend to overestimate, our ability to predict how a fighter is going to score, and maybe like not go with the win equity sometimes, right? The Vegas odds tend to be way more efficient than our like knowledge of how the fighter is going to score. Some exceptions like Marab or something like that. They're like always going to score well, just like a style thing. None of these fighters in the 9,000s like differentiate themselves for me. It's like I'm going to go with lower ownership. And yeah, I agree. Like Mullins and Moreno's probably where I'm going to try to be over the field at the expense of maybe like Bahamondes, a Walter Walker. Depending on the ownership, like we're probably not the only ones thinking this way. So sometimes the ownership does like come back in the direction that we're going as well. But yeah, I agree.
Do you think those builds are too crazy? Do you think going like a Moreno Mullins instead of grabbing one of those two and then going to your Bahamondes, your Walkers, Campbell, because there is the world where those builds look like the Bresky and then another piece of Argetta. It's weird because there's so much money. I feel like if you're taking a Bresky lineup and you're going to try to win, leave money on the table, and that immediately makes you, because his ownership is going to be higher. It's not going to be 10% like we're showing. We know all that ownership is in the Argetta Curtis Peak range. So it's like, are you going to just avoid those guys and start going middle build once you get Bresky? Because that seems too crazy.
I don't know. Yeah, no, I think it's a good card to get crazy. I do. I like the card. I like the lineups that I'm looking at. I've just done some hand builds and stuff like that so far. But I kind of like the lineups where I start with Bresky and then don't go to any of the $9,000 fighters, or maybe go to like one and it's like Melissa Mullins or something like that. It's like, yeah, we have. I don't know. I don't trust anybody on this card, right? So like, yeah, I don't mind sticking in like a Victor Hugo, a Dylan Budka. Jin Matsumoto is somebody that's actually growing on me because I'm just seeing such
There's
low
leverage.
ownership. Yeah, and he's got better odds to win his fight than Charlie Campbell. So like I think Charlie Campbell is going to see some popularity because people are going to try to get leverage on the perceived high Trevor Peak ownership. And I don't mind Campbell. I like the idea of going there and taking like both sides of that fight, different lineups. But like, yeah, I don't know, like maybe we're overestimating our ability to predict like that Gene Matsumoto is going to be a low scoring winner.
Am I crazy to say that that Campbell fight, Peak fight, is the same exact thing as the Brennan Allen fight in Curtis? Like, it really seems to be, even though it's 3 rounds and we're dealing with the main event, contextually, it seems like the scoring is right there, hand in hand.
Yeah, I agree. And so, like, I think I'm going to have about as much Brendan Allen as I have any other fighter. He may end up being my highest owned fighter. I might still be under the field. I think you've gotten like 45, almost 45%. There is a chance this main event busts, right? Because I think it's predicted Vegas odds have it as likely to go into the third round, unlikely to leave the third round. Still could go 5, could still be a first round finish. But if we're saying there's a good chance that ends in the third roundish, that just makes it like any other fight. So I'll have more Brendan Allen than I would if he wasn't in the main event, just because there is that like if he's getting like takedowns for 5 rounds or control time for 5 rounds, that's going to score extremely well. But that's not a guarantee. So I don't mind the lineups that don't have a main event fighter in them.
Do you know why I say it? Is because I feel like that's where the leverage is. It's like but there's so much ownership. Then you're talking about that Gene Matsumoto, right? He has first round equity, sneaky, and people aren't going to want it because, I mean, J.N.R. Getter is going to be stone chalk. I mean, he's a grappling monster who scores tremendous for DraftKings purposes, and it's hard to get away. Like, I feel like there's a lot of guys on this slate that I feel like are hard for me to get away from. But the numbers are telling you that, these guys have to be perfect still, even at their price tags. They're just 7,400 is such a good price.
I don't know if Argetta is going to end up being chalk because like he's got I think one big win in his box score, but I don't think most people are looking at the losses and going like, well, he's got takedowns, so if that's a win, and he's getting the control time or whatever, right? Like I don't think people are going to go to Argetta maybe as much as they should. So I think we've got him with like pretty good ownership. Like, let me see, make sure
it's about 30.
30. It wouldn't surprise me if it comes in a little bit lower than that, but I don't know if it should, right? Like, so I don't mind like kind of rostering him at that 30% clip because I think that's the right amount, and I think people might go a little bit under that, just not seeing a string of 100-point DK wins. I don't think that they're necessarily thinking through the style and like the style, like what style what kind of score his style would put up in a win.
Yeah, I mean, we just basically broke down stars and scrubs. We avoided the middle range, and I'm the middle range god. We love the middle range. That's where our bread and butter is. After this ad read, there's never been a better time to sign up for Roto Grinders Premium with NBA, PGA, NCAA basketball, NHL, MMA, and MLB. All right here or right around the corner. Get yourself a 6-month combo subscription at an exclusive price of $469.99. That's a savings of $250 instead of buying 6 individual months of each combo premium. You can also give combo a test run with our 3-day pass of $19.99. For those looking to test the waters before diving in, check the link in the description or check out the website. Listen, that middle range is gold always, but I almost feel like it's not that much gold. I wonder if we're on the same like wavelength here. I mean, can it score? Yes, but I'm more apt to be going those stars and scrubs as we kind of broke down organically at the beginning of this show. How are you going to be handling from, let's not keep Dumont, we'll talk about that, and Durandamy. Let's go Budka, Cherrier, Hugo, man. I mean, Hugo I thought was going to be a massive favorite by the end of this week. This guy gets a late notice replacement, and he's just sitting at minus 125. The inside the distance line I was hoping was going to be like plus 150. He ends up being plus 185, like maybe plus 200. Still not a worst thing in the world. How are you going to handle this?
I kind of like all those fighters. I like being over
you want to be different.
Range. But yeah, I do. I think there might be a thing to like going with some of the underdogs and then going with some of these middle range favorites. And like the lower middle range favorites, like beneath Dumont, above but still a favorite fighter. They've all got an argument, and I think they're going to see a little bit lower ownership than they would on most cards because I think people are going to be going to the Trevor Peak. They're going to be going to Chris Curtis. They're going to have money left over, and they're going to go, okay, well, now I gotta use this money, right? Like And Walter Walker's right there, like Bomb Mondays. Like, I don't know, he's got an interesting name. Like, I'm gonna go there. And I think people are gonna skip over, like, I don't know, there's a strong argument, like Dylan Budka, Cesar Almeida, they didn't score great in their Contender Series fights, but they didn't score like terrible either. It's not like a slow pace style, and that's just one fight to go, based off of. I think they're gonna not have a lot of name recognition. They're gonna, they have no game log, so I don't mind going to Dylan Budka. Got decent, win odds for his salary, about 56% chance to win, 15% in the first round. Morgan Charrier,
Yes.
yeah. So yeah, the French fighter again. Like Liam kind of pointed this out in the ground and pound, I think, and that pretty big following for a French fighter. Put up a nice score in his first fight. Was I think 110 points or so. That fight was in France, so they're maybe bringing him over now to the Apex, see what they've got. Yeah, and I don't know, what if he's good? Again, that's a possibility. I think he's not going to have a bunch of name recognition. And then Victor Hugo, kind of an interesting case here because
it is.
Yeah, his fight got his opponent Alatang, canceled, and usually then you see a replacement fighter, and usually that moves things either way, right? Where it's like, well, now he's got great win equity for the price, or oh wow, he got a really good replacement fighter, and so you just can't go there. But actually, his odds didn't change at all, right? With the replacement fighter. But yeah, I don't know. Pretty good chance. I'm seeing about 17% chance of a first round win, 55% chance of a win. I don't think people are going to go there in the mid range. And I don't mind going with his opponent Falco either. I had seen something about him having kind of a slower paced, boring style. The only line I can find for him to get like a first round win, I think, is about plus 500. Which is not terrible for an underdog for an $8,000 price, fighter. So might end up playing some Falco as well because I think he's going to be totally unknown.
Yeah, and I mean the total unknown. We like betting into these unknowns sometimes because we do the game log hunting just like other guys, and when you start seeing fighters that are on the regional scene doing what they're supposed to do, right? Like if you're on the regionals, don't go to decision against a 5-5 guy. Go in there, take guys out. First round, a minute 20. You know what I mean? He's losing in a minute and 20. So it's like these are the fighters we want to target long term. I'll always remember on this Roto Grinders type stuff, we had Brian Kelleher years ago. I don't know if you remember him. He came in against a Brazilian guy, and he was like a 6-1, 7-1 underdog. And it was against a journeyman type of plus winner in the UFC for the Brazilian guy, and he goes in there and destroys him. And you're like, well, you have to look at the ways that these guys score. It's sometimes not, the numbers of, it's a plus 600. It's what happens when he pays off that, 10%, 5%. Is it worth that upside?
Yeah, and that's the thing with UFC is we have such limited information, right? Like these guys might fight a couple times a year, so there's not always a lot to look at. And yeah, I agree. These replacement fighters can go either way. And sometimes it really just seems that they're like, well, who's in the city, right? Like who's in the area that we can get, in the region that we can get right now, who can make weight. But like sometimes they end up bringing, like sometimes the guy that's laying around in the city is somebody who's been training, training for another fight or whatever. And so sometimes it can go either way. And they end up, somebody ends up a minus 800, favorite that was not supposed to be a strong favorite, but sometimes it's a really competitive fight, and sometimes even the line doesn't reflect the talent of the fighter. I remember this is probably a few months ago, like Jim Miller got one of these replacement guys, just crushed him in the first first round. But there was I remember on that same card there was another replacement fighter, I think maybe going up against Malarkey, who ended up looking a lot better than we expected. So yeah, it can go either way.
Yeah, that's why this sport is so fun. And there's going to be a fight, though, up top there that we did not talk about so far. And you know what one that is? It's Ignacio Bahamondes versus Christos Giagos. This could be a car wreck, okay? Let me be honest. Christos Giagos is somewhat of a grinder. He is a fantasy-friendly but doesn't score well type of guy. Like, I think that's the best way to say it because he can score takedowns. He can get control time, but he doesn't do a lot with it. And I just don't really have a lot of faith in him this long in the tooth. He slows down deeper in fights. But I also think to myself, are we just silly to look at Ignacio Bahamondes in last fight. He was taken down pretty easily and controlled pretty damn easily. It's just the problem is Bahamondes is going to be faster, going to be way better on the feet, use those long limbs. I actually think this is a sneaky fantasy type of relevant fight that people might not want to go to. The only problem, and I'll send it off to you, what happens if Giagos comes out hot in the first round and then he kind of negates that upside for Bahamondes? Because that's kind of in the realm of possibility on this fight.
Yeah, this is a tough one to get a read on. Like, I think Giagos is going to end up coming in pretty low owned. So you probably have to try to be over the field because there is some leverage there, right? It's not like he's got zero chance to win the fight, but
Half the
it's not.
victory is great.
Yeah, and he'll probably score well in a win. But he has one of the lowest odds to win on the fight. I think he's got like slightly worse odds than Court McGee, which is not like something I like to see. The three worst. So there's basically three fighters priced above Bresky that have worse odds to win: Cronoli, McGee, and Giagos. I'd rather go to Bresky, take the odds, take the salary, because I think people are just going to. I think they're all going to come in about the same ownership. So I'd rather take the lower price fighter that has the better chance of winning the fight, and the better chance of winning the fight inside the distance in the first round. But yeah, Giagos could score well, and I don't particularly trust Bahamondes. But Bahamondes could score well too. Like, he's got a couple of like near 100 DK point wins or 100 DK point win in his game log. So it's a hard one to get a read on. I'm gonna feel stupid either way, right?
It's the problem because Bahamondes seems like he would be like a binary type of guy, right? Like, he's going in there getting, takedowns, offense, but that's the problem. When you get a takedown in the first round, you control, then you don't do a lot with it in the second and third round. That's not going to score well. And then if you're getting knocked out in the second and third round, that limits that favorite in Bahamondes. So yeah, I thought that was a weird fight for the context of the slate because there's world where it busts. And it feels like because of the salary, people want to get Bahamondes in there. And let me be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if Bahamondes catches him early and knocks him out either. Any other points that you kind of want to go over? Because it's actually a fun card. And I really like that you said get wild because we were supposed to have another women's fight. And I felt like that's where you and I shine. We need these women's fights on these cards, don't we?
Yeah, it's an interesting card. I think it's a good one to get a little bit crazy. Like, sometimes you have like a string of fighters at the top. They're like minus 800, minus 600. And you're looking at their opponent, and their opponent's got like a 15% chance of winning. And you've got 3 or 4 of those fighters that have a 15, 16, 18% chance of winning their fight. And people will talk about like leaving salary on the table, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, if you're leaving salary on the table, that means you're skipping over like one of these fighters has like an 85% chance of winning their fight, or a couple of these fighters have an 85% chance of winning their fight. There's nobody on this card that has a 75% chance or better of winning their fight. So you're not making that sacrifice, like leaving money on the table. I'm seeing like the best win odds on Melissa Mullins. It's about Mullins, Bahamondes, Moreno all in the same range here. I don't know. I don't necessarily need to go to any of those fighters. But they're not even like the more popular fighters in that range. Probably like Walter Walker is going to see, I think, higher ownership than all of them. Alex Hernandez might see higher ownership than all those fighters. So yeah, I don't know. It's a good fight to leave some salary on the table. You're not making the sacrifice doing that you normally are on a card like this. So yeah, there's like, it's a good fight to get a good card to get crazy on. And because there's nobody you really need to go up and grab in the high end of the salary range.
You know what's fun is when you get to have a GPP type of slate right before the best card of the year, because then you're not like, oh, I need to play a cash lineup and it's just a 1v1 or a 2v2. That's never fun, right? Like, now we have 3 5-round fights next week. I mean, I'm getting amped up. Are you?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great card. I mean, we've kind of been seeing a string of like lower level fight night cards outside of the pay-per-views. Like, I think other than the Noches one. Some of the fight nights haven't been that high quality, and we're saying, well, if they had a fighter that was able to kind of fight in this range of the calendar, and they're a good fighter, they're putting them on UFC 300. So yeah, it's finally going to be here, and that should be a good card, and higher prize pools too.
Yeah, higher prize pools finally. It's like, come on, man, why do we have to be on Masters Week? We may have gotten at least a 350 to 400, 500 to first place. But listen, higher buy-in too. Make sure you guys get some tickets. You know, we want to fill these contests, continue to do this free content for you guys. Just know that, wow, I like that guy's hat. You know, I like your comment. How about that? Yeah. TJ, get wild this week, please, will you? I mean, Squirrel said to do so. And if we don't win, we certainly hope that you guys are. That comment threw me off a little bit. I mean, it was TJ, how wild are you getting? But you came in here, you opened the door. I was signing off. Muted.
Oh, you're on mute. Muted.
My bad. Muted in producer mode. I'll show you exactly how wild I'm getting, and you can tell me if it's too wild. You can tell me if it's not wild enough. I'm not going to change it at this point, but this is where we're at. You got Trevor Peak as my highest owned guy, Allen 2, Hugo, Campbell, Mullins, Morono, Curtis. That's my squad.
I just feel like my big thing is the upper echelon. It's differentiating up here because there's so much. There's obvious builds that people can get to the walkers, like you said, Swirl. Wouldn't you agree? It's like the middle range, maybe grab one there with one of the lower price guys.
Walker, I have 9% of.
That's smart.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think that so yeah, I'm like looking at the top lineup. I'm like, it's a little chalky. Like I think the combination of like Peak Curtis, Walker Hernandez is like a little bit too easy to get to. So yeah, but yeah, then I like looking at the exposures, I like that a little bit better.
Hey, TJ's happy with his
I'm not going to adjust the individual lineups because I don't know enough about the guys, but as long as my exposures are good, I'm happy.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Get ready for next week, TJ. Higher prize pools, definitely a higher buy-in. And again, if we don't win, Squirrel, TJ, myself, we're out of here.